Hello all, I hope you are all well in these extraordinarily strange times. I'd like to welcome you to the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena where we're hosting you today. Today in this special arena we're going to be discussing Islamic banking. I was fortunate enough to chair a panel at the Innovate Finance Global Summit in 2018 where the question as to why, and still why, there is no sharia-compliant, no Islamic banking digital challenger. No Monzo, if you like, of the Islamic banking world. I also, on the 11FS breakfast show, I saw our friend Norris from Renee's pop up, and I had to kind of sort of quiz him on that as well. Yeah, Jordan, cue the clip.
Good morning, Ali. Good to see
Hey,
you.
Ali.
Any scope, do you think, for offering Islamic banking products? Because, I mean, actually, sort of Islamic banking is very, very, very underserved in the market right now. And it feels like actually the opportunity for doing something in that space that actually really complies with Sharia law would be very beneficial. What do you think?
So we have been thinking about it. It's I think in terms of sort of priorities, ever-changing list of priorities and everything else, I think it's been a little bit on a backbench for us right now. That said, this is something that, as I mentioned, we have discussed internally quite recently. So whilst I'm not making any claims here that we are going to be bringing this back any in the coming months, but I think perhaps later this year is something that we are opening this topic up again.
So with all that in mind as a backdrop, joining me today is Akmal Saleem, who is one of the founders and CEO at Rizq. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, Rizq.
Rizq. How are you doing today, Akmal? How's well, it must be a very strange time for you guys.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time. Appreciate you reaching out and us getting together on this show.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about Rizq because let's take it a big stage back. Let's start with the why. Why did you and your co-founders? Why did you decide to start this bank? Was there a big aha moment?
It's an interesting one because for me, I've been in this space now for over 10 years. In terms of the quote unquote Islamic economy, and back then it wasn't really called the Islamic economy, and there wasn't that much kind of definition of what this space was, but it was just a lot of people looking at products and services which would be tailored towards Muslims and which meet their specific kind of needs, values, without compromising certain aspects of their belief. And so I've been actually thinking about, and I wouldn't say specifically about a digital challenger banking app, but I've been thinking about where those next areas are which need to be developed. And when my co-founders kind of approached me on this opportunity, as it was, for me it was a really interesting time, perfect time. The digital transformation that the world's seeing before the pandemic itself, and that's a different dynamic that's just come in. So I wouldn't say that there was an aha moment because Islamic finance itself has been developing for decades. I think it was more like a okay moment, which was the time is now. So I would kind of put it in that category.
Excellent. So it wasn't like a lightning strike. It was almost like a slow build up of this is a chance. We now can do this. We can now do this. It was kind of almost like a slow build to it.
Yeah, it was a slow build, but at the same time it was a compounding effect where I'm trying to choose my words carefully because it was a failure upon an industry as a whole, if I'm being honest. From the traditional banking sector to the Islamic banking sector as well. So there's no one addressing the needs of personal retail banking, and that's where Rizq is positioned at this moment of time when we're launching. And so for us, it was there's a problem that needs to be solved. Certain things are happening in the market, and we can't see anyone else solving them at the multiple levels that we feel that we can come in and address. and so it just came together.
My personal experience with Islamic banking is from the absolute legend that is Iqbal Khan, um, who founded HSBC Almana. And I remember having a few conversations with him kind of post financial crisis, talking about how that Islamic banking is very much the benchmark for all things ethical and all things in terms of ethical banking. And I know that, for example, like the Islamic Bank of Britain, they were having post financial crisis a bit of an influx of non-Muslims looking for Islamic banking products, which made me kind of go, would not have expected that. With that in mind, why has, on the digital side of things, why is this not done before? Because obviously Monzo, Starling, Revolut, they've all got kind of a slight millennial feel to them, a slight ethical. I like these guys, I trust these guys. Why do you think it? What's been holding some of the banks back from moving into this space?
I think there's two sides to this. The first side is infrastructure. You'll know that on an incumbent level, there's this question, and 11FS really put together this really well. Is like, are incumbents becoming a digital bank, or are they just digitizing banking? And so the difference is, on the face of it, there's only a digitization of that infrastructure that was previously there that's being plugged into. And so for someone like Monzo, Revolut, Starling to come about, they are truly digital, because from inception, that's kind of been in the blood of the business. Why hasn't it happened from an Islamic banking perspective? Is similar. Infrastructure, number one, wasn't there on a more core banking level. I think that's really important to note. 3-4 years ago, it wasn't easy just to suddenly build a digital bank, plug into all of this incredible technology that's been developed, especially in the last 24 months or so, and streamline that whole process to be able to deliver a product. So I think that's one of the reasons. The other thing is maturing market. That's the other side of it. The Muslims are not in line with the mainstream in terms of the products and services that they engage with. We're a few years behind, and so there wasn't really a need as well, potentially, or that the same need as maybe it is right now didn't exist on a demand level, or even on an education level. Younger Muslims are even more tech savvy now, and so this element comes into it as this kind of launches, and now there's a number of entrants in the market, and I'm sure there's going to be several more in the coming years.
Absolutely. Well, when it actually comes to Sharia compliance, I mean, what are some of the considerations that you need to take into account? Because there's not exactly an off-the-shelf Islamic banking product that you can go out and buy. And imagine you have to do a bit of developing yourself, or even putting various components together.
Yes. From our perspective, it's about looking at it from a core. The Sharia perspective is on a current account is it shouldn't accrue interest. People can't earn interest, and we can't develop interest-based products. I think that's in the most simplistic form we're talking about. That expands out in a spectrum when we start talking about things like credit cards. We start talking about insurance, where we start talking about even simple things like cashback, and we talk about things like overdrafts. There's a whole spectrum. Then obviously the big one is mortgages, which is the complex problem that so many people across the world are trying to solve. I've got a really interesting view on this, if I'm being honest, and I think I just want to mention now, which I think is a good time to mention, is that my background isn't banking. I want to just kind of put that out there, which it's important. My background isn't banking. I'm actually a communications expert. In the last 3 years, when I was in the Middle East, I set up essentially an Islamic investments firm, and I got into Islamic finance. And for the past 5 years, I was, through my business activities, I was engaging more and more on the Islamic finance level. For 10 years since I started my first business, I was looking at what products and services are available to me as a business owner when it comes to developing my business in a Sharia fashion. What, microfinancing, SME financing, and to be honest, there was virtually nothing that I could access or that banks would speak to me on an individual level. So for 10 years, I've been fighting to try and find something. I've traveled the world, conference after conference. I've spoken at places like the WIEF. More recently, there was an Oman Islamic Fintech forum that I was invited to speak at. And so it's more about my evolution through business that took me into understanding the constraints within the Sharia aspect. And what I found was everybody was just trying to solve all the complex problems. And so when we built Rizq was about simplifying the first and foremost thing, which was retail banking, personal banking. Let's fix this, which is at the Sharia level the most easiest way to fix. From this, we've already now developed or are developing some incredibly innovative ways to solve the credit card issue, some incredibly innovative ways for us to solve things like ISA accounts, for example. And when we start explaining that, which I can't share at the moment, unfortunately, which I'm kind of desperate to share with you, but
I can see.
Yeah, so those are going to be really groundbreaking in the way that people can engage with us.
One of the things that, because you're effectively building from the ground up, it must be relatively straightforward, again, with the old 11FS saying, it's you want to build a digital bank, not a digitized bank. It must be a lot easier starting from scratch as opposed to, again, taking off the shelf or kind of an existing solution.
100%. I think this is a really important point, is we are building a value proposition which fundamentally understands the economics that need to go with the business itself. The business model has to work. The unit economics need to work. All of these areas have to come in tandem for us to be able to launch something which is going to be ultimately my goal, which is to make this sustainable for decades, not just, a flash in the pan. It's really important that we've addressed this, and that's where certain decisions that we have taken launching Rizq have lent itself to that philosophy. So, for example, we don't have a banking license. We are more on a Revolut kind of style of infrastructure, compliance, regulatory framework. We've taken that approach because we felt it was the most cost effective. We felt it was the most the quickest way to market, most streamlined, and we believe that to be an extremely good decision sitting here today, because the pandemic has not that we not saying that we predicted that side, but if we had gone down the other route of getting the banking license, putting in the money to do that, we would have been in a very tricky situation right now. And so it's been a good thing for us. And as you know, people are going to rely on digital-based services, products after we come out of this situation, and that industry is going to boom. And we are well positioned now to help facilitate the boom, because a bank is the central part. So we want to facilitate that boom.
Absolutely. And you were, I believe, just to kind of get my sort of timelines all together, it was February this year, 2020, was when you officially kind of launched or became open of what you were doing. When do you think people would first be able to get their hold of accounts?
So right now we're in a really good position. The applications are in test mode. Our web banking is all up and running, so online banking is there. We're in final phases of just connecting all of the things together. Next month, we aim to have a soft launch. So this will go out to a controlled user group who will be able to test the application both on Android and on iOS. We've built native applications for both, and we'll be able to collect a really interesting set of feedback. Our aim then is to launch the product end of May or in June. End of May is being extremely ambitious, even though that was our target. But with obviously the developments with the coronavirus issue, unfortunately, we can't predict if we're going to have all of our staff available, if suppliers and vendors that we're working with are going to be able to execute, because obviously nobody knows who may need to take more time off, and things are slowing down across different areas, unfortunately. So, but we would be, we're cautiously optimistic that June is going to be a really good time for us to launch it.
Absolutely. Well, let's look at the kind of the business model as a whole, because there's an awful lot of neobanks and challenger banks out there. There's some that I think are incredible, and I can see the long-term business model. But on the flip side, there's some where I'm thinking, what's the long-term business model? So, I mean, how are you intending to be revenue generating? I mean, you're not just going to be going after VC funding for the next 10 years.
No. Our thing is about building good products. So we definitely want to go into that. I think, again, what's important here is that we are coming in on a digital level. However, the space is big on more of what I'm kind of calling and creating a space, dare I say it, is like a hybrid level between the traditional and digital, because there's a transitional period that we need to go through, and that transitional period is for us to come in and look. And I mean, the example that I'm going to kind of give here is Metro Bank, for me, missed a big trick when they came into the market. I think that they could have become one of the leading banks if they just thought 10 years ahead and they really looked at the trends in how Revolut came about. They were like a half-hearted challenger bank to me. And if they came in with that strategy to say, look, we're addressing the hybrid, we appreciate that, but we're committing to digital now, they would have been at the forefront of this digital evolution within the retail and within the banking sector. So for me, I'm not saying we're like Metro, because it's not the perfect comparison, but I'm saying that at core the thinking for me is we have a set of people who are using traditional Islamic banks here in Europe, and we have the ability to give them what they require, but at the same time appeal to a younger generation who have a different emerging need, and bring that all together in one experience. For example, most of the digital banks within our space, they are only focused on mobile. And even more recently, a traditional Islamic bank in the UK has turned off, from what we understand, their online banking, and they're kind of pushing everyone towards their mobile banking. We believe web banking and online banking is still an important tool for people. And so we're coming in and making sure that works really well and is integrated. So I think that's important in terms of our positioning.
Absolutely. I think Starling Bank, I remember when they first launched, they said we're going to be mobile only. September 2019, they announced that they were going to be doing a web portal, because what some of their customers wanted is to give people the choice. With that in mind, are there concerns that your Monzo, your Revolut, whoever it may be, that they may start to put forward a sharia-compliant offering? Or do you think that they're so far along now that in order to go back, they have to almost again start from scratch to be able to offer that? And in which case, are there partnership opportunities?
Really, really good question, this one. And a few people have asked me about that. I think on this level, obviously, a mainstream bank could come in, or a mainstream challenger bank like your Revolut, Monzo could come in. I don't think it's particularly hard for them to come in, but I think on this level, we're looking at it from a sentiment point of view. For Monzo to bring out a sharia-compliant proposition for the Muslims,
our Daily Mail would have a field day.
now, firstly, the PR will be incredible, but it's more around they're only going to give what most people see as just interest-free banking, and that's another issue for me, which I am really honing into and explaining to people. Rizq is not just a certified stamp of Sharia. This is not what Rizq is about. We are a lifestyle-focused Islamic banking application. And our features will prove that, because we understand what the Muslims in the West, especially at this moment of time where we're launching, what they want. It's not just about the interest-free element. It's about, for example, how do we use our digital platform to make the paying of zakat easy, which is a fundamental pillar of Islam? How do we help people during Ramadan and during their obligations towards things like performing Hajj? And how does that integrate into a bank on a banking level? That's something that hasn't been done before on the way. I mean, I'm talking about things like, I want to develop like an AI functionality within our application which will automatically calculate people's zakat, and then they can, with maybe just a click of a button, it can just get done. It's linked to the charity, it gets paid, thanks very much. Now, on a banking level, that's really powerful for Muslims. Really powerful. So Monzo and Revolut, for them to go out and develop that requires quite a lot of understanding. And for us, it's an easier proposition to build because of just the whole market, the experience, the understanding is there.
I've got to say, forgive my ignorance. Sorry, the pillars of zakat.
Yeah. So zakat is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. So and so it's a fundamental that every Muslim who has the capacity and isn't underneath a certain poverty line, they have to give essentially 2.5% of their wealth to charity, to the people who are under a certain poverty line. And so for a bank to facilitate that in an easy way, because the calculations of zakat, some are more standard, but for people who have businesses and have different assets, there's lots of different calculations that have to take place in order to understand how much of your wealth do you need to give as an obligation every year.
See, as a non-Muslim, I consider myself a non-practicing agnostic. That way I can't offend anyone. I want that feature. That sounds like an incredible feature.
No, the thing is that from the charity side, for sure, we have even more. For example, one of the functionalities that we're developing and is going to be there is an auto donation functionality. So every time someone uses their debit card, they can choose a charity and set a rule where 10 pence, a pound, 50p, whatever the person feels like giving, will automatically be siphoned off and will be donated to charity. And so that, again, from a lifestyle perspective, is really important and powerful. So we're trying to go into the sentiment of lifestyle to build a banking application, and I believe that hasn't been done before, because I've never been communicated in an Islamic banking world, especially, or finance world. I've not been communicated like that.
Cool. Well, what's the end goal for Rizq? Are you gonna expand across Europe, the world? Are you gonna move from being a purely Islamic finance to maybe a multi-faith ethical bank? What's the reach for the stars end goal?
Well, we're ethical, so we're never going to turn anybody away. We want as many customers from whichever faiths, backgrounds to come and to give us a go, and for us to be able to provide them a service which will be really good for them. So our positioning is clear. Where are we going to go? The thing is, for us, it's clear that the world is our oyster, and I know it's such a cliche in so many ways, but we already have been approached by people and, groups, banking groups from the Middle East, from Europe, from Southeast Asia. As we're completing a round at the moment, a small fundraising round on a seed level, it's attracting a significant amount of interest. So Indonesia for us is a really important market. We want to go there. 200 million Muslims, obviously it kind of plays in, but we have to go there in the right way, because again, we believe in that kind of lifestyle sentiment that has to be the problem solving core. So definitely going global is there for us. Building out a more ethical proposition, I think our values are clear, and as we launch and people get to see who we are and what we do and how we operate as an organization, I'm sure that even people who want more ethical banking will start to adopt our product.
Cool, excellent. Two other kind of questions I want to put there. One, we're asking this to every challenger bank. Atom Bank has got will.i.am. Klarna has got Snoop Dogg. Which musician do you think best personifies Rizq?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Oh,
to put you fully on the spot there.
Yeah, put me fully on the spot on various ways. This one, I mean, I have to say that there's two sides of answering this question, because you've got like a personal level of how I see, you could say, the creative arts within Islam, which is very important. And then you have various kind of views and spectrums around how people engage with the creative arts within the fold of Islam. I think for me, if I was looking at it from a Rizq level, there's an artist called Sami Yusuf, which he's very well known within the Muslim world. Why is it him? I think, and it's important for me to explain this.
Yeah, that's the real question.
Yeah. It's very important for me to explain this, because it could be taken in wrong ways as well, and could be controversial as well. So it's from the poetic aspect. You know, during the inception of Islam in today's Saudi Arabia, in the Hijaz, as it was in Medina, where our Prophet, peace be upon him, he was delivering the message of Islam. As he was doing that, it was at the height of language. So communication and language, the Arabs and Arabic was at the height of its language. And so when the Quran came down, it superseded anything that the poets or the people who were masters in Arabic language, it superseded anything that they could even fathom. And so creative arts, you could say, or poetry, this has a huge kind of weight in Islam. And so when you talk about what artist, you know, I know we're talking on more mainstream, the poetic aspects of how Sami Yusuf has produced some content, especially out there, and produced some art, has been really powerful over the, in terms of how that industry has grown. So yeah.
Again, that question, I always ask it because not for the answer, the reason behind it. Got to ask as well, what's the story behind the name?
Oh, it's really interesting, because any Muslim who engages with the word Rizq needs no explanation. Because Rizq has multi-dimensional aspects to it. In the most simplistic form, Rizq is provision. So it's divine provision that comes to everybody. But that provision is multifaceted in the way that it operates, you could say. So it's not just wealth. Provision is also things that it relates to your sustenance, your shelter, your children, your your health, your knowledge. So Rizq is everything that comes down, and there's two sides to the first part. Is that it is preordained. It's already written. Your Rizq is written, and that line, your Rizq is written, has been passed down generation after generation after generation within the Islamic world. So you could go to any country and you could say your Rizq, and they'll say, yeah, it's written. We know our Rizq is written. So whatever actions we're taking, we are just trying to realize our Rizq rather than earn the Rizq. And so this we could talk about all day long. I mean, this is something that we could discuss, but that's what Rizq is on a very simplistic snapshot.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to obviously chat with us today. Where can we find out more about Rizq and yourself?
So at this moment of time, we've got a pre-registration campaign happening. So you can go on to getrizq.co, drop your number in, and people can pre-register. So when we go live, they'll get a message saying that they can obviously download the application. At the moment, most of our activity is on things like LinkedIn. People can follow me, can connect to me. More than happy to, and I'm giving regular updates as we're getting to the point of launch. Our social media will start to ramp up in the coming weeks as well, which will connect to people on all different platforms. Our website will also be going live in the next couple of weeks as well, where there'll be a lot more information on who we are and what problem we're going out and solving.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, very much looking forward to this journey. Well, thanks very much.